Uh, we'll begin with the topic,
The topic,
triangles of
two
education.
triangles of education.
Where in the first part
Where
we'll
in the first part we'll
discuss
discuss
differences between all parents, the school, that is the staff, uh, and the children. So we'll begin with kind of a game. This is an interactive session, so I would like to request everyone to contribute through the chat window. Um, so the first part is what do we expect from children? So if you put in your responses in the chat window, I'll put them up in the slide here. So yeah, we expect them to listen to us. What else? Anything that comes to your mind. Grow into good human beings. Good education, responsibility. So basically, everything that you see lacking in the world will you feel the need around you. You want to put everything in your child. All rounder. Okay. What about parents? Expectations from parents. These expectations can be from anyone. It can be from the grandparents of the child. It can be from the teachers. It can be anyone. Society. To guide the child. For Deepa, is this being responsible for the children, as in parents being responsible for the children? Okay. What else? That's it. Is that all that society expects from parents? Yes. Very good. To be role models. Again, obedient. Successful, Okay, so we'll
Make sure
go with the third column. What about teachers? What do you expect from teachers? Okay, they must facilitate learning. Well informed of the upcoming tech and guide the children. What else? Guide by the side. Okay, where did you hear this phrase, Gayatri ma'am? Sorry, Jaya Krishnan ma'am. No comparison, approachable, simple. Cooperating, polite. So yeah, do you see a distinct difference from what is expected between all the people here?
ఆడియో రావట్లేదేంటి?
Again, happy, obedient. Can you see the difference between what is expected between who? In let's say a current day, uh, today you are a parent, someone is a teacher, and there is a child. So in this current time frame, if you have certain expectations from the child, you have certain expectations from the parents, and you have another set of expectations from the teachers. Uh, can you compare and think uh, who has the most responsibility here, so to speak? Think about it. As in, if you Yeah, you can see the list. You can see the number of things that are there in the teacher's side. There are a lot more things that are unsaid in the parent side also. But can you see how the lack of number of things in the child's side, and yet somehow we are in this pyramid where the child is the one who gets most stressed, followed by the parents, and obviously the teacher has a different kind of stress altogether. So, um, what what can be done, or how can things be changed to balance this out? So think of it in this way: if we have to work as partners. Now, in the recent circular that I showed you, this is a very kind of revolutionary thing that NCERT has put together and shared. Uh, and it's very interesting to see how schools, parents, and children move with this together, move ahead with this together. So, for this together to happen, for this collaboration to happen, how can we go about it? If we have to even this chart out, if we have to shift a few things here and there so that it kind of balances out, uh, can you share what we can do? So now, if you don't want to think of the child as a subject of all your expectations, if you want to think of the child as a person, another human being in process, and the parents also, if you think about them as individuals who are learning, who are in the process of learning, and the teachers also are in the process of learning together with the parents and the child. So it's basically a triangle, as is the title of the presentation. It's one of the triangles where all three parties are learning. So in this kind of a scenario, what changes could you make in the previous table? So for a moment, stop thinking of the child as a student. Stop thinking of the parents as just parents. Stop thinking of teachers as just teachers. All three of them are human beings, and as human beings, as a responsibility, shared responsibility towards each other. Uh, can you think of a few points that we can put here? Let's say expectations from a child. Let's pick up an example like in the previous slide, we have put up listen to others. So, do you think listen to others will come only in uh, the child's column? Yes, somebody raised the hand. Do you have a question? Okay, so listen to others would come in all three. Next, help each other. Again, this would come in all three. Share responsibility for learning. Again, ownership and responsibility. Once again, this will come in all three. Now, if, yes, agreements, very important. What else? Any more points? Adaptability, yes, very good. Okay, so now we see that all the columns have been evened out and everything ultimately is a shared uh, responsibility or a shared subject. So now in this kind of a situation, the first thing that happens is there is mutual respect because now mutual respect comes out as a result of it, like you can say as a side effect of it. And because of this mutual respect, there is a higher understanding between all the three parties. And since there is a higher understanding, there is a good collaboration. Okay. Am I audible now? I'll try to speak a bit louder. Uh, okay. So now coming to the next part, now that we see that things can be simplified, and this is what is generally being spoken about in the CBSE circular. So, because of this mutual respect, there is a cycle of spontaneous learning that happens, not just between the child and the teacher. It happens between the parent and the teacher and the child, and the child and the parent. So, the first basic thing that people tend to do is point fingers at each other because this is mainly a result of the fear of society. So we often tend to compare a lot, or even if we don't compare, society has this tendency to point out, my child can do this, your child cannot do that. What is going on? Why can't your child do that? Things like that. And very honestly, why your child cannot do something is uh, none of anybody else's business. It's the child's identity, and as a parent, he or she is your child. So the abilities and doing something also don't have any relation. So there is no point in pointing fingers, so to speak. And if there is a two-way learning happening, this won't happen anyways. Then teachers as co-parents, if the teachers look at it this way, that the child is coming to you as a child who expects you to be a co-parent, who expects you to be their like family for the next few years at least. The teachers also should learn to look at it that way, and the parents also should learn to trust the teachers in that sense. So, from the point of the teachers, very simple shift in mentality, you can say, is if you stop thinking of yourself as somebody who is meant to have all the answers, and stop looking at parents as people who you have to answer to, then this will clarify a lot of things. And as far as the parents go, if parents are actively involved in the school processes, in the school uh, working, and try to learn from how things are happening, try to learn from the children, the teachers, uh, the routine, then they get a better understanding. And then instead of pointing fingers, then questions will immediately come to your mind. And it is always right to ask questions. You have the right to ask questions from teachers, from the principal, but then they have to be genuine questions and not taunts or leading questions or rhetorical questions. So you have to genuinely inquire why something is being done in a certain way in a school. You have to genuinely ask what is happening, how do they see the child, things like that. So because with this openness, there will be a synergy between the home and the school environment. And in these lockdown periods, this synergy can also be developed through things like virtual tours and documentaries. So the CBSE people have suggested virtual tours. Virtual tours are basically what used to happen when FaceTime came out, or when WhatsApp video call first came out, where people would chat on the phone, and they would take you around the house. See, this is my hall, this is my kitchen, this is my bedroom, this is uh, the way we live here, these are our plants and things like that. So that is basically a virtual tour around the house. And if children are involved in these kind of things, so they think about it very creatively, and they also feel like everything is together. Like there is no difference between a teacher's house and my house, my parents' house. Everything is one world. So there is diversity, but no difference. Then the same thing can be done with documentaries. So recently, what we tried out with our, I think, fourth standard children, we gave them an assignment that they have to make a documentary in their house where they discuss the places that they really like in the house, the places that they do not like so much, and why, and also a few places around the house that they neither like nor dislike. So a lot of things get clarified in this. That first of all, they don't necessarily have to like something or dislike something, and if you like it, it is still a part of your house, and if you don't like it, that is also a part of your house. If anyone has any questions, please put it in the chat window, because I have to mute everyone so that the people who don't have a very good connection don't get disturbed. So yeah, feel free to put everything in the chat window if you have any questions. So yeah, so this was one idea that the CBSE people have given. And another one is if you have question is where you understand the child's nature a lot better. So yeah, for those people who have issues with the volume, I think most of the people can hear me well. So I think try increasing your volume a bit, or maybe try changing your headset. Okay. So yeah. So question is will help your child help others understand your child better, and it can be very simple things. It can be about if you give certain assignments that require children's very open-minded thinking, like one thing that we had done a couple of years back is we asked the children who were old enough to understand peace and chaos and things like that. We asked the children to mention how they could contribute to the peace of the world. So you understand the kind of thinking that happens in the child's head, and there are other things, very simple things. What does the child enjoy? What do you see the child doing most of the time? Do you think the child likes to watch more things? Do you think the child is more fascinated by music, by dance? Does the child like to listen more? So we understand the learning tendencies of the child also, and that way then the parents can contribute in helping the school understand uh, what the child responds to better. Then another thing that during these lockdown days, what can be done is discuss the learning outcomes of things that you teach in class, in your online classes, in whatever assignments are given. So the learning outcomes must be discussed with the parents, and on a different level with the children also. For example, if you tell the parents that this particular chapter has been taught in this way and these particular questions have been asked to develop patience in the child, you obviously cannot say that to the child, "Okay, solve these questions and your patience will increase." So we have to deal with the same thing with the children in a different manner. So when you say patience, how does that translate into the child's head? Is it more about stopping and thinking? Is it more about being more considerate? Is it more about being more respectful? What is your uh, route or vehicle to reach that patience? So that part can be discussed with the children. Then Q&A sessions with the parents. If we can have, if the class teachers or somebody can take weekly or semi-monthly question answer sessions or something. So that also will clear a lot of things. Then online webinars and workshops like this one. So if schools conduct online workshops and webinars for parents as well as teachers, then it will be a deeper connection between everyone. Then one thing that CBSE has suggested in multiple places in that document is human-human relationship, human-nature relationship, nature-nature relationship. So this is something that can be observed um, by the children, and obviously if parents are learning in the process, both of you can uh, observe it together, and the teachers will have to do it in this sense that to be able to ask more questions, to be able to understand better what the child is seeing. So human relation would be things like
ठेवताना काहीतरी वाचतोय
what does uh, how does one human being interact with another? So in the house, how do grandparents interact with children? How do grandparents interact with parents? How do parents interact with children, with grandparents? Uh, Different people in the society, how are doctors interacting with the COVID-19 patients? Just because they have a very infectious disease, are they being secluded and being treated very harshly or badly? Or are they being treated as patients with care and with concern? That is human to human. Human to nature is how we interact with the environment, how we interact with nature. Um, a good thing that has happened right now is the Amazon rainforest, which was being cut down at a very huge, like unbelievable, unprecedented rate, has now come to a halt because somebody filed a petition in court and that went through. So they had to stop killing the Amazon rainforest. So there are people who are destroying things, but there are also people who are saving things. So, what is the human nature relationship? How do you feel when you watch a sunset? How do you feel when you see a caterpillar nibbling on a leaf? So, all this is human nature relationship. How do dogs react to you? How do cats react to you? Then you have nature to nature relationship, things that we usually don't have a keen eye for. So, like the caterpillar example that I gave, it can be looked in this way also that the caterpillar, once there is a caterpillar infestation, we say there is an infestation in plants. So they start killing all the leaves. But at the same time, you can look at it this way that for plants that are a bit older uh, and have a lot of caterpillars on them, the leaves may be reduced quite a lot, but the caterpillars also poop a lot. So their feces will fall down on the ground and they will serve as fertilizer for the same plant. And in this process, now interestingly, the poop is toxic for the caterpillars. So the caterpillars usually make sure that it doesn't stay on the leaf, it falls down. So this is the kind of nature-nature relationship that is there, and it can be seen if you pay attention. Now, coming back to the reason why CBSE has been strongly suggesting on studying these symbiotic relations, uh, is for children to understand social roles, so that they understand diversity, so that they understand the responsibility, the shared responsibility between people, and they also have a certain sense of gratitude towards how things are working, because they are not working as a God gifted thing, they are working because um, there is a system. People are doing the responsibilities and they are doing it with a lot of care and a lot of effort, because of which everything works. We get food on our tables and we are safe right now, even in this kind of a situation. So, yeah, so this is the first triangle. Now, coming to the second part. So far, does anyone have any questions till now? Thank you. So I'll give a minute. If there are any more questions, we can address them here, or we can move on to the second part. Okay. So we'll move on to the second part. Okay, so this hand, head, and heart thing has been mentioned by a lot of people, including Mahatma Gandhi. But one of the first people who have mentioned it was like a written record, and the way it entered into the education system, into the modern education system. One of the first ones was Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi. So what he said was, thinking leads man to knowledge. He may see and hear and read and learn as much as he pleases. He will never know any of it except that which he has thought over, that which by thinking he has made the property of his mind. Is it then saying too much if I say that man by thinking only becomes truly man? Take away thought from man's life and what remains? So, uh, this is one of his most famous quotes where he talks about the depth of knowledge, the depth of education, and how it influences people and in turn influences civilization. So when he says man, he is talking about humanity. So yeah, coming to the hands, the heart, and the head. Uh, what is okay? What is the default role of hands? What are hands for? You can put in your answers in the chat box. Hold, pick, feel, throw. So basically, manipulate objects. Then, similarly, what about the heart? What is the primary role of the heart? You can talk about it from a biological perspective. You can talk about it from an understanding, like a human understanding, whatever. Okay. Biologically, they pump blood. And in the social context, what do people think the heart does? When people say I'm heartbroken, people say this person is a heartless creature. So, what does that heart signify? Yeah, feelings, nourishing, nurturing, emotions, yes. And what about the head? What does the head do? Yes, it is very logical. rational thinking. Think, learn, accept, reject. Yeah. So yeah, so basically it does all these things, and this is what these parts, the hands, the heart, and the head, this is what they do individually if they are if they don't work in synchrony. Now, see what happens in alternatively, like can the hands feel? Do the hands have the sense of feeling, something that the heart usually does? Or does the heart have a sense of understanding? Or does the head do anything? One thing has already come up, thinking. Thinking is like an art of act of doing. So similarly, all the other parts also have the ability to do such things. So yeah, the hands also have the ability to feel. If you grasp something, you know it, whether it is hard, whether it is soft, whether it is hot, is it cold, is it prickly, is it wet, slimy. You feel all those things, and whenever you feel that, so when you hold something, all that information also reaches your head. Now the heart, uh, if you have the heart to understand somebody else's heart, somebody else's personality, somebody else's way of thinking, if you have empathy, then you are not just doing it from the heart. It has a lot of thought behind it also. That is, your head also is working with it. And as far as the head goes, uh, just because it understands and learns doesn't mean it can't think, project, experience, and think of consequences. If you say pick up somebody that something of somebody else's, and you project that in your mind, what will be the consequences? That person will come, that person will find out that that thing is missing, and they will probably start crying. So you also develop an understanding of other people's feelings, and that is also registered in your brain, in your head. So these things also work together. Now, we discussed in short what is a head-based learning, what is a heart-based learning, and what is a hand-based learning. Yes, there is an interrelatedness of all these parts. So, head-based learning is typically what you notice today, where children learn chapters and chapters only from books, only to pass examinations. Answers are given in class because these are the answers that will get you the most marks. Uh, Interestingly, even the CBSE board people, when they made the board, if you check there's something called the NCF, that is a National Curriculum Framework. If you just search for National Curriculum Framework India or CBSE, it's very easily accessible. You can download it. You will see that they never had it in their mind that they would create a system where people would be ranked and people would be judged on the basis of the marks that they get, and they never had it in their mind that that is what you would help decide the capability or the potential of a child. So this is their effort once again to try and help everyone understand, the parents, the teachers, schools, children, everyone, on what is the intention of education. So if you check the NCF, you will notice that a lot of focus is given on the understanding part. So it is if you are giving answers to the child for scoring high marks, then basically you are making the child lazy and you are making the child handicapped. So like so there are two stories, two interesting stories that portray this. Um, one story is about the boy who wouldn't speak. So in the Western world, the, this culture has caught on, and gradually it is seeping into our uh, subcontinent also. That if a child has any difficulty, the first person they visit is a therapist or a counselor. So similarly, there is a similar story. There is a boy who just wouldn't talk, wouldn't speak, 6 years, 8 years of age, and just wouldn't say a word. So the parents would every now and then take him to different speech therapists, to different counselors, and nothing would happen. And they had checked out all the people that they had heard of, and they were sitting lost on a table having dinner one night. And the child says the food has less salt. So uh, uh, everybody is confused and happy at the same time. There are tears of joy that the child has started speaking. And the way the child speaks, it seems that the child has had the ability to speak since quite a long time. But the parents don't know it yet. So then they ask the child, hey, why haven't you spoken up till now? So his response is, till now everything was fine. So uh, when everything is given to the child, there is no effort from the child, there is no growth from the child's end. Uh, then there is another story where there is a girl who keeps shredding paper, keeps tearing paper. Um, the parents take the child to the relative's house. The child would quietly take a newspaper and start tearing it to pieces, crumpling it, and putting it on the ground. Then, if they go to a friend's place, the same thing happens at the friend's place. If they are sitting at home, the same thing happens in their own home. So they are at a loss, and once again, they visit a range of therapists and counselors, and ultimately they go to a friend's house, and uh, they are telling the person, because the person asks, "What is the deal with the child? Why is she shredding paper?" So then they tell the friend that we have taken her to so many therapists, so many counselors, the best possible people, but the child doesn't seem to be stopping. So the friend just looks at the child and tells her, "Kid, if you stop tearing papers, then your parents will stop taking you to different doctors." And the child stops. The child just looks at the parents and says, "Why didn't you just say so?" So a lot of times what happens is we consider that children are just children and they don't understand anything, and it's there's no point in taking their opinion because they are immature or they don't have the ability to do that. But this can surprise you quite often. So respect the child's intelligence and do things that promote the growth of the child. So the learning must happen in such a way that all three of them are catered to, because as we'll see in one of the subsequent slides, it's all dependent on the stimulus. How much stimulus the child is getting, the deeper the learning will be. Now, what has CBSE said? So in the circular written by the chairperson of CBSE, that is Anita Agrawal, she has mentioned about activating the triad of children, parents, and teachers. We have already discussed this in the first angle of how everyone can work together. Then, to do what? If you have to work together, to do what? So, this is a nice opportunity to look at the problems that are there in the community, in the environment, the geography, in the society. Now, if the children, instead of looking at just the books or just things that are on a very superficial level, if they look at things that are real, that are around them, and that they are suffering from, um, then they actually start thinking. And being children, they think about it in novel ways, in innovative ways, in ways that they are meant to. So, uh, textbooks, she has very clearly written, textbooks cannot be the only source of knowledge, but should support children to construct knowledge. So the textbooks are just tools. They are just tools to help the child construct his or her own knowledge. And this knowledge will be based on what they observe, what they perceive in everything that is around them. The different people, the different jobs that these people do, um, the nature, the environment, technology, tools, equipment, cultures, everything. And here, very interestingly, she has mentioned vocation, not jobs. So the difference, the main difference between vocation and jobs is the mentality. A job is something that you do for the sake of doing it. A vocation is something that is a part of who you are. So, yeah, so what influences people, and why does work influence people in such a way? So, yeah, so this is what she has written. So, yeah, um, how does learning happen? So, there are a few things. One is the short term learning that happens, which usually happens in the classroom in with the textbook and in the few minutes before the examination. So the studying that happens is transient knowledge. Uh, It's not your knowledge, it's just information. So this happens on a very chemical level. It connects things in your brain on a very chemical level. And because it is on a chemical level, once the chemicals go down, that connection is no more there. So, which is the reason why you remember everything sometimes during the examination, sometimes you blank out, and these issues happen because of that. This combined with dopamine and cortisol, which we'll come to in a minute. So, one very easy example of this is if a child is learning to ride a bicycle. Now, if you are trying to ride the bicycle on your first day, you will have difficulties. On the second day, you will have difficulties. On the third day, you will have difficulties. Maybe you will start riding on the third day. But on the third day, if you stop and then you try riding the bicycle again after a month or 2 months, then you will have to start all over again. But if you ride the bicycle for a week or a couple of weeks and then stop, even if you start riding the bicycle after 6 years, you will still remember. Because there is a certain amount of time that is required to make associations, to make connections, physical connections. So these physical connections are in the form of neurons or yeah, neurons. So neurons are basically brain cells. So one brain cell associates, say, the hand with the legs and that with the head and everything. So the connection for cycling is established. But if it is only on a chemical level, you tend to forget after a very short time. Now, there is a scientist, Oliver Sacks. He has written a few very interesting books. Do go through his work if you get a chance. And he deals with these neural connections through hallucinations and what people see but is not there. Now, These hallucinations work because of association of neurons. So he has done a lot of study on that, and what has been recently discovered is everything that you learn in the connection that you learn it in has a new set of connections, a new set of neurons, a new set of brain cells formed in that particular way. So if you have, say, if you have seen only red Marutis, the first time you see a white Maruti, you won't see it as a Maruti. Your brain will translate it as some other object until unless you actually go, see, touch, explore. Till that time, the brain doesn't believe it. Because in your brain, the shape of Maruti is associated only with that particular car. So there are many things like that. On a larger scale, it could be um, things like there are often you have these kind of people who you don't know, but you find them very irritating. You haven't even spoken to that person. The person hasn't even been introduced to you yet. You don't know who this person is, but somehow you have this image in your mind that this person is very irritating. That happens because of this. So your brain has associated various facial features, various body languages, and has created a definition of irritable people. And that is why you see certain people as irritating. Um, so this is also one form of learning. Then the last one is um, this is one point that we had discussed some time back. That is no rewards, no punishments. So why does that work? Because there are a few happiness chemicals. We'll discuss this some other time. Of which one prominent one is dopamine. Now, dopamine has come in the news very recently for multiple things. One, because of motivational speakers, because dopamine is a target chemical. It leads you to develop targets, aims, and it gives you happiness when you achieve that aim. It gives you happiness when you are moving forward for that aim in a noticeable way, and it gives you happiness even if you set an aim. These are the positive effects of dopamine. Now, as far as the negative effects go, dopamine is also released when you drink alcohol, when you look at your phone for a long time, and when you have sugar, things like that. So dopamine also leads to addiction. So this is one chemical, and the other chemical is cortisol. Now, cortisol is something that is used by society uh, way too often for guiding people that are a part of the society. So, for example, if you want in your society um, children who learn to write by the age of 4, so you will start inducing fear into everyone whose child does not start writing by the age of 4. So that is cortisol. Now, cortisol is the fear chemical, and it is also a group chemical. If one person is afraid, then cortisol is also released in another person who the person communicates to, and that person also is afraid, is nervous. It starts inducing fear in the third person, fourth person, and it spreads like that. So that is one thing. Secondly, uh, cortisol reduces learning. When you are afraid, your brain does not stay in the learning phase anymore. Now, how do these two chemicals work? One is if your child is happy, if your school has a happy environment, then obviously cortisol won't be there, and hence learning will be promoted. Now, how do you induce happiness without rewards? So you realize the effect of punishment. If there is punishment, there is cortisol, and if there is cortisol, there is no learning. Similarly, in exams also, if your children are very nervous because of the exams, this is what is going to happen, and there will be no learning, and the exams will be a waste of time. Now, as far as the rewards go, um, so if instead of giving rewards to children, that if you learn this, if you understand this, if you score this much, you will get a chocolate. If instead of that, if you are more involved and if you get the child involved in the process of learning, so the child will start paying attention. Now, as you pay closer attention, the child will discover new things, things that the child has not seen before. And these new things will raise a lot of questions, further questions. I didn't see this before, but now that I see it, how did it come here? Where is it from? How is it related? Now, with these questions, you develop a greater understanding of whatever you are studying. And with this higher understanding, you will get even more involved. This happens with us when we do not understand something at all, ever. We gradually lose our interest in it. But if we start understanding something challenging a little bit by little bit, then you start getting involved in it. And what happens when we get involved? Again, we pay more attention to it. So this is a self-feeding loop. So now if this loop is self-feeding, then why do you need something artificial, something external to keep this going on? So hence, no rewards are needed and punishments also are not the answer. Now, now that we have discussed that there is a way to learn in a more wholesome way, so we'll just discuss a few points on a few ideas on how it can be done. So according to the CBSE circular, there are a few suggestions here, and I've also added a few suggestions on based on the learnings that we have had as a school. So the a few things that the CBSE circular suggests is having very insightful discussions, very deep discussions. So I'll give you an example. On March 30th, which is Vincent Van Gogh's birthday. Van Gogh is an artist, a painter, was an artist, and his paintings are very expensive because of the history it has and because of the art culture that has been created around it. On 30th of March, which is his birthday, a certain painting from Netherlands that he had painted got stolen. So it just came up, it just popped up in the news and it seemed interesting. So we introduced it in the class as three. We told them the story. We did a lot of brainstorming on why art can be so expensive. And then we gave three questions. Make an artwork that is worth stealing. And the second question was, um, why would it be stolen? The third question was, uh, what would it, how would it be stolen, and what is its fate now? So basically, the child has to think from such a unique perspective which the child has never thought about, and the child is playing himself or herself as the role of an artist, as a curator, as a person who appreciates art, and also as a person who is writing the entire story. Now, this question we followed up with. Now, since we were on the topic of stealing, we also followed up with robbing and stealing because that was one of the points that was raised by the children. And we asked the question, is robbing and stealing the same thing? We discussed a bit about courage and slyness, cunningness, and then we followed it up with a discussion on greed, on One was greed, and the other was, yeah, greed, wants, and needs. So the children were supposed to make a list of things that you want, things that you need, and things that uh, you would be greedy if you went out for. So the role of greed in the human mind, basically. And mind you, these are only fifth, sixth standard children. So yeah, so these kind of interesting conversations, interesting discussions pop up when you do actually let the children drive the learning. Then you can discuss about vocations. Vocations is, again, as I said, the jobs that you do, but they are less than jobs. They are more like roles and responsibilities. And there was one game called the Gupshup game that company in Nagpur is manufacturing. If anyone knows the name of the company, you can put it in the chat window. Uh, I think it's called Infinite Games, Infinite Minds, something like that. So that is also a good game to start conversations. Then there are a lot of YouTube resources. There are a few children's books. One of them is called Same, Same but Different. There is another book written by, very interesting book written by Hillary Clinton, which is called It Takes a Village, which takes into consideration the African uh, concept of It Takes a Village. The readings of these books are available on YouTube. You can always check them out. Um, then you can also discuss recent changes in nature. Now that you keep seeing these various posts, various news pieces on how certain places from where nothing could be seen in the skies can now suddenly see the Kanchenjunga, or can see various mountains that you couldn't see before. Then you have various animals walking into the cities. You have various birds and insects and other creatures appearing in the cities. So why is this happening, and how are we responsible? What is the relation? What is our relationship with what is happening right now? Then you can also discuss on diversity, how different people are different and also united. So, yeah, so this can be coupled with the same, same but different story. It's a very nice story. Do take a look at it on YouTube. So that is one. The second one is long research projects. Um, so long research projects on nature would be things like say if you are doing a conservation study, and if you want to see the number of sparrows in your locality, if you want to see the number of dragonflies in your locality, so you can help children design a log chart, a log book on how to record this, and how to record this over a period of time. See whether it is affected by sunny days, see whether it is affected by Sundays and weekdays. So in weekdays you will have more traffic on the road. On Sundays you will probably have lesser, depending on whether you are living in a big city or a small city where you have people coming in from outsides. So um, yeah, so these are nature-based topics. Then you can have projects on anything that the child sees around them. There are fans, bulb, mixer, food, um, clothes, anything. So these are long research projects. Now, when we say research, and before giving the topic straight away to children, there has to be a benchmark. There has to be uh, there have to be a few ideas that are inculcated in the children, among the children, so that they understand how deep you can go in a particular topic. So, for example, if you pick up the topic of clothes, Also have to study the environmental impact. What does it mean to buy a 150 rupee t-shirt? Just because it is 150 rupees, are you saving on it, or are you paying very heavily? Because if you buy that 150 rupee t-shirt, you will go and you will tell people that I saved so much of money and by buying that 150 rupee t-shirt. And those people buy that 150 rupee t-shirt. So basically, you are increasing the market, you are increasing the demand for that 150 rupee t-shirt, which in turn will increase the demand in the clothing industry. And the clothing industry already contributes to more than 25% of the pollution in the world. So you are basically feeding into that. Now, another example of like a positive example uh, or interesting example, you can say, of these kind of projects. If you pick up, say, food, and if you study something that is very common, very easily seen, like say brinjal or eggplant. Now it has so many different names based on where you eat it, and somehow it is also a very common vegetable. You see it in a lot of countries. So studying that one particular thing and studying how it is cooked in different cultures helps you gain an understanding on what is in abundance there, and the general diet of the people. For example, even in India, we notice that the people in the north eat a lot of butter and ghee because it's colder there. So you require foods that generate or contribute to your body heat. So you learn these kind of things. You also learn how uh, indirectly you learn how nature influences what we eat, and also at the same time you learn how nature has influenced culture. So these are things that can be done through research projects. So if you study them in such a huge, such depth, then you can create a benchmark for the children that the next time you do an independent project, you can think of so many things, you can study so many things. Then annual day, annual themes, projects. This is again related to the previous thing. We had discussed about the annual day thing in the last session also, about how even the creation of sets requires such a lot of thought, and how they can be used as learning experiences. So last time I gave an example of Chanakya. Maybe this time I can tell you about Mary Poppins. So Mary Poppins, the drama was picked up by us for annual day uh, because we had noticed a general trend in Amravati that the parents are busy with work from 10 a.m. in the morning to 10 p.m. at night, and children usually stay up to have a good night with them, and then go to sleep, because of which they come to the school cranky, and because of that crankiness they hit each other and there is aggression in the school. So we took this drama because it addresses the parent child relationship in this, and then we also explored the suffragette movement, and we also explored the um, industrial revolution, because the movie is based, sorry, the books are based on the in that era, the second industrial revolution time. So we went into those avenues. Now, okay, so these are ideas, and now a few things that we always need to keep in mind. Um, we tend to sometimes um, we tend to say things like, I don't have the time for this, ask your teacher when you find time, or things like this, because we usually don't have the time then. But instead of that, if you just say things like, I don't know, or why don't you find out and tell me, or if you say things like, can I find out and tell you by tonight, or things like that, so it generates a different kind of relation with the child. Now, in the first case, if you say, I don't know, first of all, the child realizes that there are things that uh, are unknown, and there are things that they can find out even if you can't. And if you find out, you are interested in knowing, so the child also gets to teach you. That is one. The second thing is, if you tell them that you will find out and you will tell them, it means you have taken up the responsibility. And if you fulfill that responsibility, there is a trust, there is a formation of trust. So, if you do say something, always ensure that you do it and put it in practice. So, if you tell the child that I'll tell you tomorrow, you have to find out and tell the child by tomorrow. So yeah, so if you think of these things from so many different perspectives, you are definitely covering head, hand, and heart, because the children will be involved in making things. The children will be involved in thinking so deeply, and also the children will be uh, feeling so much because of it. And yeah, so that's there till now. So then, normally, what would happen is a child grows up with the notion that no, I cannot ask questions, and grows up to be an adult who does not want to know at all, which is what you can see in the figure here. But instead of that, if the child realizes that the child has the power to learn, the power to figure out, the power to find out, so the child will do exactly what we have discussed in this session. They will use the books as tools and find out for themselves. Now, if so much of learning is happening, if you think about it, what about the examinations? Are the exams the only way to evaluate children? How can you evaluate children? You can put in your responses in the chat box. What are the different ways that you can evaluate children creatively? If you say that a child, say, has learned to write or knows how to write, can you say that the child is intelligent? How can you evaluate the intelligence of a child? Okay, very good. Yes, based on the questions that the child is asking. The fact that the child is asking questions at all is also a result of intelligence. Curiosity and observation, yes. Memory, okay. Okay, this is very interesting. Memory is a sign of intelligence, or is it um, the control or the putting it aside? Because what does intelligence do? Is intelligence moving or is it still? In Hindi, we often say, right, that someone is very chanchal. So when you say chanchal, it is related to, yes, it is moving, right? It is related to intelligence because the child is always moving, the child is always active. There is something going on in the head. Now, if there is memory or the act of memorizing uh, means that you have basically put your intelligence aside for a moment so that something is imprinted in your brain. So, knowledge and intelligence, these two are separate things. So, knowledge is basically the impression that has been registered in your brain, so to speak, and uh, that is related to memory. And intelligence is something that keeps moving or keeps things moving. So, moving across different pieces of knowledge is also a matter of intelligence. So, yes, thank you. Uh, okay, the way of executing activities, yes. Different types of intelligence. You have linguistic, kinesthetic, uh, daily activities. Yes. So that's what. So it comes down to activities where things are happening. That is when intelligence is there. So now, if intelligence and knowledge, if these have to be evaluated uh, together, they form the process of learning. You have things that are unperceivable, things that you don't see on a day-to-day basis. You have things that are perceivable, things that you see on a day-to-day basis, and then you have things that are seen much later on. So if learning happens at such a depth, taking into consideration the hand-based learning, head-based learning, and the heart-based learning, if all of them are catered to together, then you have children who appreciate things a lot, things that are there around them, and they deal with everything with a lot of kindness. They have a lot of gratitude, and they develop empathy, respect, and all these features that you can see here. Now, these are things that are there, but they cannot be evaluated directly, but they can be evaluated indirectly. So you give a task to a child, and if the child does it, um, then you get a sense that probably the child has these factors. But then there are a few qualities that are perceivable, that are directly perceivable. So you have uh, you see that the child is more energetic. In case of a child who is learning only from the books, since the learning is happening on such a superficial level, only on the basis of information. So the child ends up being overloaded with the information, but there is no value to it. There is no weightage to that information. There is no depth to it, and there is no interconnectedness. So the Oliver Sacks point that I mentioned, The child doesn't relate himself to that piece of information, so it's very external. So in these kind of children, the energy is very low. They don't have a gratitude for anything because they don't realize the connection, and obviously they don't appreciate things also. So this is the major difference that is there between a child who learns only on the head level and a child who learns from all three. So you will see that a child who learns from all three will always be energetic, will be so-called obedient. Now, obedient directly means lack of intelligence, because it's a person who is not cross-questioning, who is not learning anything from that interaction, but that child is basically just taking it as direct instructions and doing it without thinking, without understanding. So that is obedience. So that's why I put the quotes here. Uh, you will notice obedience, but what you are probably noticing is mutual respect. You have a lot of respect for the child, and then you exude that respect towards that child, and the child pays back that respect by listening to you. But if you ask the child to do something very pointless, then the child will ask you. The child won't disrespect you, the child will ask you what is the intention behind this. So they look or seem obedient, but not always. They will always try to ask things, they will always try to rationalize things. Then you have children who are hardworking. Um, the children will not stop at anything to achieve what they want. And if they want to know something, if they want to discover something, they will be driven and completely focused on it. And then academic performance will come as a side effect. So if you are all these things, if you are learning consistently from all the sources that are around you, then the questions in your question paper will no more be puzzles to you, but they will be just things that you have to put on paper. You already have the knowledge inside you, you just have to share it, express it. Then they'll be okay. So this happens quite a bit. A child who does not understand things to such a depth will always complain on things, on pointless things, like why is it so hot, why do the roads have so much of traffic, why this, why that, why is it so uncomfortable, why can't I get a better bed, things like that. So in the house there'll be less complaints, there'll be more a more reasonable approach, and if there is something that the child can work on, if there is something that the child can respond to, the child will do it. They'll be more helpful and they'll be more happy. In long term, most of the things that you see here are what you refer to as 21st century skills. That is perseverance, lifelong learning, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, innovation. Um, you also have adaptability and curiosity. So these things will be seen as the child grows older. And incidentally, these are also the points that are mentioned by Cisco's education team and the CBSE people, the Supreme Court of India, by Forbes magazine, on points that will be that are required for children to be successful in this coming generation. Okay, so now that we have seen the effect of the three things, that is head, heart, hand, working together, and the education also dealing with all these three things together. Uh, there is a deeper level of education happening, but not as deep. So, yeah. So, if all this is happening, what is happening beyond them? What is happening other than this? Are we dealing with mindfulness? Are we also considering maturity, creativity, spirituality, connectedness? Are we also are these also included in head, hands, and heart, or are they beyond them? So we have discussed about what these three can do alone and also with their interconnections, but somehow these things don't get included in this. So then what is the next step? So if we have already discussed hand, heart, and head, so this is the education, the Indian education as it used to be before the Western education, the modern education system that we call uh, came into being. So one example is the integral education that is given by Sri Aurobindo. We'll discuss this in depth some other time when we discuss integral education. But just to give you a general gist of it, it deals with not just three parts. Uh, it deals with the physical, vital. So physical is more or less physical talks about the hand part. Vital talks about the heart part. Mental talks about the head part, and the psychic and the spiritual talk about the things that are that were not discussed before. So just to help you understand, and we'll discuss on activities, discuss about activities on how children can identify these five parts later on. So the first part, the physical, is very clearly understood. It's the part that needs food. If you have enough food, you feel energetic. If you have too much of food, you feel lethargic. If you have too little food, then you feel very stressed out. And lesser food means that you are on a very survival. Uh, your body is in a survival mode. Then you have the vital. So vital is the part that is based on the breath. So now with emotions, the things that are the basic part of the heart. Uh, if you get angry, the first thing that happens is your breath quickens. If you feel sad, your breath becomes irregular. If you feel excited, your breath becomes quicker. So that is the pran or the breath, breath of life. Then you have the mental, that is the sense of intellect, the thinking, the intelligence and knowledge and everything that is there. Then you have the psychic. The psychic is how close you are with yourself, with how much of introspection can you do, the wisdom that you have, the mindfulness that you have, and the sense of being, that is the psychic. Then the spiritual is the connection with the divine. Divine being whatever you talk about, the uh, God or the spiritual energy that is around you, things like that. So, integral education, the education that we do in our school, deals with not just these three, that is the head, heart, and hand. It also deals with the psychic and the spiritual. So this we'll discuss some other time in detail in one of the future sessions. So yeah, thank you.